My husband Curtis looked at me and snapped. A hospital stay just for an ulcer? It's not that serious of a disease. You're making too much of a big deal out of it. It seemed like he wasn't worried at all. It's because you pushed her too hard, Ashley said, making him uncomfortable, so he declared, I'll go buy something to drink, and left the room. After a while, Curtis came back looking very anxious. You have only a year left to live, he said solemnly. What? I was surprised, wondering if there had been some explanation from the doctor that I was unaware of. No, I just overheard your parents talking outside. I was going to greet them, but then I heard something like that. I wondered what my parents were talking about. As we sat in silence, Ashley suddenly burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. Wondering what was going on, we both looked at Ashley. Then she turned to Curtis and dropped a bombshell. What are you talking about? Isn't that about your mistress and not Mom? The air froze. Dad, we know everything. Hey Stella, isn't breakfast ready yet? As usual, Curtis called out to me. I was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. It'll be ready soon, I answered while setting up the corn soup and bread on the table. I told you I have a meeting this morning. I have preparations to make. Hurry up. I placed the omelet on a plate in front of Curtis, who started eating without a prayer. After all, I was just preparing everything as usual. It was he who overslept. Suppressing my thoughts, I started doing the laundry. Once Curtis hurried out, I finally took a breath of relief. The morning news show started, and I took my breakfast to the lively sound of the TV. As a housewife, I spent my days like this, taking care of Curtis. After 25 years of marriage, with a lot of time spent alone at home, I've been thinking about picking up a hobby, but my shy nature always gets in the way, preventing me from taking the first step. Every day, I prepare breakfast for Curtis, do the laundry, clean, shop. I was getting bored with the repetition of the same days. I've thought about going to work, but I've been frail since I was young, and after giving birth to our daughter Ashley, I became even more prone to illness, so that was not an option. Will my life just end without anything changing? As I was thinking this, the doorbell rang. The sound of the front door unlocking was heard, and Ashley entered. Mom, are you here? She said, opening the door to the living room. Welcome back. Ashley sometimes comes back like this to check on me. When I'm not feeling well, she even helps with the housework. She's such a capable daughter. How are you feeling? I've been doing quite well recently. Ashley looked relieved to see my face, smiling gently. That's good to hear. Then, how about we go out for lunch? You must be bored, right? She suggested. We went to a restaurant near where Ashley works and talked about her recent life over the meal. These moments were a happy time for me, and also a break from the monotony of my daily life. After finishing our grocery shopping for dinner and returning home, Ashley set down the bags she was carrying and quickly went back to her own place. When I asked if she didn't want to see Curtis, Dad's probably fine, she simply replied. Indeed, Curtis, at 48, still looked young for his age. He would work out at the gym after work, and lately, he even started caring about his looks, keeping his body fit and his skin lively. He always had high self-esteem, saying, I don't want to become someone who gives up just because they're getting older. Compared to Curtis, I feel like an old woman, overshadowed by him and treated coldly. After Ashley left, a flyer on the table caught my eye. It was something that had been put in the mailbox. The flyer featured a beautiful woman. It seemed to be for a yoga class being held nearby, taught by an active model, offering reasonable prices for people of all ages. I wonder if I could manage yoga, given my frail health. But I found myself making excuses and tucked the flyer away between the pages of a newspaper. Looking at the clock, it was almost 5 p.m. I must start preparing dinner soon. If Curtis comes home and dinner isn't ready, he'll yell at me again. Since he was in a bad mood from the morning, I planned to make his favorite dishes. And so, I found myself preparing dinner for Curtis again, as usual. Around 7 p.m., Curtis came home. I immediately started preparing the shower. Curtis prefers to shower before dinner. While waiting for the shower to be ready, Curtis was drinking a can of beer and reading the newspaper in the living room.
Wow! Isn't she a beauty?
I was startled by his sudden outburst, only to realize he was looking at the yoga class flyer I had tucked in. Huh. A model and yoga instructor, huh. It's close to our house too. Hey, why don't you give it a try? He said, looking at me with a sarcastic tone. An old woman like me going there would just be a nuisance. I brushed it off lightly, but he sighed. You always say that. Try to take care of your body a little. It seemed he was also tired of my negative thinking. You used to be good in your younger days, but you're becoming more of an old woman day by day. He left those words behind and headed to the bathroom. When did I start to feel so miserable? It had become so routine that I seemed to have become numb to it. But even so, I can't go back to my younger days. I knew all too well that the reason I never took action was none other than myself. Envious of the radiant smile of the woman on the yoga class flyer, I felt like I was living in a world far removed from blaming someone or something else. On his next day off, Curtis left with the yoga class flyer. Are men allowed to go there too? It was a class held at a young woman's home. Wondering if that was really okay, I asked.
It says here people of all ages and genders. So it should be fine. I'm just going to observe. If it's not okay, I'll come right back.
He left the house cheerfully, leaving me behind. I wish he had taken me with him. Even though I had chosen not to go, I found myself blaming others again. Fed up with myself, I decided to go for a walk for a change of scenery. I wondered if I could catch a glimpse of what the yoga class was like, even if from outside. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. Perfect for a walk. I walked at my own pace. Eventually, I reached the neighboring town where the yoga class was. I didn't remember the address from the flyer, but I had a rough map in my head. And so, I walked looking for the yoga studio sign. Yoga. Yoga. Then I realized. There were no signs for a yoga studio around here. I can't tell where it is. Just as I was about to give up and go back, I heard a familiar laugh. Turning the corner towards the sound, I saw a man and a woman I recognized, sitting at a garden table, enjoying tea. It was unmistakable. Curtis and the yoga class instructor. Not wanting Curtis to notice me, I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but they seemed to be having a great time. Despite being my husband, I was impressed that he didn't seem out of place even next to a young woman. Suddenly, I felt miserably shabby and pathetic. Unable to stay still, I quickly returned the way I came. Why do I always end up like this? All the way home, I kept blaming myself. It wasn't just about my deteriorated appearance. Above all, I needed to do something about this self-deprecating personality. I resolved to change. In the evening, as I was preparing dinner, Curtis came home in a particularly good mood. How was the yoga class? My heart raced, wondering if he knew I had seen him having a good time.
Yeah. It was fun. The teacher was around Ashley's age, but she had proper qualifications as an instructor and seemed very competent.
So she was that young. I wondered what kind of conversations they had, what made them enjoy their time so much. I became a bit curious. Maybe I should try yoga too. I murmured to myself, then. No, that would be impossible for you. Curtis looked me up and down exaggeratedly before laughing. There were a few others there, but none like an old woman like you. You'd just embarrass yourself. Hearing that, I got angry. I was jealous of the yoga instructor, but I had been trying to think more positively. Seeing my expression, "If you're so angry, you should have done something about it sooner," he said dismissively before disappearing into the bathroom. I thought about attending on a weekday when Curtis wouldn't know, but I was sure they'd identify us as a couple based on our last name or address. If Curtis found out, he'd surely berate me. So, despite my resolve earlier in the day, I became gloomy and secluded myself. 3 months had passed since Curtis started attending the yoga class. He went there on his days off, not just for yoga, but it seemed he was also helping with minor DIY for home decor and other small errands. Isn't that something you shouldn't have to help with? I brought it up to Curtis, concerned, but he snapped at me. A girl around Ashley's age is in trouble, and you won't let me help her? Or do you think there's something shady going on? Ridiculous. Even though he's not the kind to help around the house even when I'm feeling unwell. It was unbearable to feel like he valued the instructor more than me. But I couldn't neglect my household duties. I focused more on housework, and Curtis complained about me even more. Ashley, who occasionally came to help, said to Curtis, "Dad, you're being too harsh on Mom." But he dismissed her. That's Stella's job. If you've moved out, don't interfere. Ashley, perhaps fed up with Curtis, started coming back when he wasn't around. Then one day, I finally fell ill and collapsed. Luckily, Ashley was coming home that day and took me to the hospital. Ashley was shocked to find me curled up in the kitchen, thinking her heart would stop. She even contacted my parents, who live nearby, and I was surprised to see them visit me in the hospital bed after the examination. I couldn't help it. You're already frail, Ashley said, looking down. Who could blame her for worrying? Thank you for worrying about me. After explaining the examination results to Ashley and my parents, they left the room, relieved. I was diagnosed with a gastric ulcer. After seeing my parents off, Ashley came back to the room to vent. I contacted Dad too. He's late, isn't he? I knew Curtis wouldn't leave work early to rush over for me. But it still felt lonely. I'll come again tomorrow. You'll need a change of clothes, right? Ashley couldn't bear to leave me looking so forlorn. I was grateful to have raised such a kind daughter. That was my only pride. I'll contact Dad again. See you tomorrow. Ashley left, but Curtis didn't come to the hospital room that day. The next day, Ashley brought me the things I needed for my hospital stay. Looking somewhat guilty, Curtis was standing behind her. As soon as he saw me, he sneered. A hospital stay just for an ulcer? It's not that serious of a disease. You're making too much of a big deal out of it. He seemed not to be worried at all. You've been pushing her too hard, Ashley said, making him uncomfortable, so he announced, I'll go buy something to drink, and left the room. Really, I can't believe him, of all people. Ashley seemed thoroughly disgusted. I thought he might just leave, but surprisingly, he came back quickly and very anxious. You have only a year left to live, Curtis said, looking serious. It seemed it was no joke. What? I was shocked, wondering if there had been some explanation from the doctor that I was unaware of. I just overheard your parents talking outside. I was going to greet them, but then I heard something like that. I wondered what my parents were talking about. As we sat in silence, Ashley suddenly started laughing. Ha ha ha. Wondering what was going on, the two of us looked at Ashley. Then Ashley turned to Curtis and said something shocking. What are you talking about? Isn't that about your mistress and not Mom? The atmosphere froze. Stella, are you okay? I came to check on you. Cutting through the tension, my parents arrived.
Grandma, Grandpa. I was just about to talk about everything.
So, we're doing it now. Dad was silent, but his glare kept Curtis from running away. Dad, we know everything. Ashley began to tell everything. It was about a month after Curtis started going to the yoga class. On her way home from our house, Ashley witnessed something unbelievable. That day, I had been telling Ashley about the yoga class. I reconsidered wanting to go myself and asked Ashley to check it out for me. I asked her to go and ask if it was really a kind of place that would make me feel out of place, like Curtis said. I could have gone myself, but I was scared. Sure, I can even check it out on my way home today. Ashley agreed cheerfully and went to the yoga class. When Ashley got close to the studio, she saw someone leaving the entrance. She quickly hid around the corner to see it was apparently Curtis and the instructor. Curtis was supposed to be at work that day, but Ashley couldn't have mistaken her own father. Feeling something was off, Ashley stayed hidden and watched. After a while of conversation, Curtis and the woman, after checking their surroundings, leaned in and kissed. Ashley was shocked and couldn't suppress her feelings of contempt after seeing her father like that. That's why she started coming home only when Curtis wasn't there. After watching Curtis leave, Ashley immediately contacted me. Mom, you'd better stay away from there. Ashley, usually so positive, saying something like that made me ask what was wrong, but she wouldn't say. I just feel like you and that instructor wouldn't get along. Looking back, it must have been Ashley's kindness trying not to alarm me. Unaware, I regretted missing another chance to go to the yoga class, but a few days later, while walking near the studio again, I spotted a suspicious woman hiding by a fence, seemingly trying to peek inside. How disturbing. Approaching, I realized it was Ashley. What was she doing? She hadn't noticed me approaching. Not wanting to startle her, I stopped and called her mobile, hoping it was someone else, but knowing it was Ashley. My wish shattered when she noticed the call from me and walked away from the studio to answer. Hello, Ashley? What are you doing there? I asked, sighing. Surprised, Ashley looked around and saw me. And when she saw me in the distance, I'm coming over. She ended the call and hurried to me. I thought there was some suspicious person. Seeing my disapproving face, she looked awkward. So, what were you doing? Staring back at me, she said. We'll stand out here, let's talk somewhere else. Deciding something, she began walking. We can go to her house since Curtis won't be back yet. Feeling the seriousness, we headed home. Upon arriving home, I made some tea. After taking a moment to relax, I once again asked Ashley. So, what were you doing there? That's the yoga studio Curtis attends, right? I had previously asked her to scout the place for me, to see what the atmosphere was like, but I thought that matter had been resolved then. Look, before I say anything else, I want you to know that I'm always on your side, no matter what. Starting with that, Ashley told me everything she had seen. On the day she went to observe the yoga studio, she saw Curtis and the instructor coming out looking cozy. They talked intimately and kissed after checking their surroundings. She had been hesitant to tell me, carrying the burden alone to avoid hurting me. I wanted to believe in Dad, too, Ashley said, sipping her tea. She had wanted to believe, so she kept going back to the yoga studio. But contrary to her hopes, Curtis was frequently there, getting along well with the instructor. I was thinking, if I could somehow catch them in the act. If she had proof, she could confront Curtis. She thought by having something over him, she could make him stop treating me badly. I could have been reported for stalking. Discovering her there helped Ashley regain her composure. Yes. Despite hearing about Curtis's affair, I somehow remained calm. I had suspected something beyond just yoga lessons. Curtis denied it, but I lacked the courage to delve further. Hey, Mom. Are we just going to leave things as they are? Ashley looked at me worriedly. If you're up for it, I'm willing to help. I immediately understood what she was hinting at. You're asking if I'm considering divorce? Ashley just nodded without saying a word. What do I want? I asked myself. Honestly, even if I decided to divorce, I wasn't sure I could make it on my own. Having been a housewife all this time, could I really find work? Plus, there were my health concerns. Ashley offered her support, but I couldn't always depend on her. Sensing my deep thought, Ashley reassured me. Even if you decide not to divorce, like I said earlier, I'm always on your side. And left before Curtis came home. Curtis arrived and immediately started complaining about everything as usual. The taste of dinner, the cleanliness of the house, as if he was searching for faults on purpose. Had it not been for the discussion with Ashley earlier, I might have been able to ignore it, but today I couldn't. Hearing the facts from Ashley, everything Curtis did started to disgust me. His voice, being in the same room, everything felt repulsive. That night, after Curtis had gone to sleep, I decided to check his mobile phone in a desperate search for evidence. If there was proof, I would divorce him. I knew it was wrong, but the betrayal started with Curtis. Convincing myself, I checked his phone. But my last hope was shattered. Texts and photos with the instructor, undeniable evidence of his affair, were there. Quietly closing the phone, I went to the living room and lay down on the sofa. I couldn't bear to sleep in the same room. I'll contact Ashley first thing tomorrow. And that's how our plan began. Ashley and I decided to inform my parents first. If the divorce went through, I'd move back to my parents' house. So, it was necessary to explain the situation. Hearing this, my parents were furious. After discussing it as a group, we decided to act at the moment that would make the yoga instructor the happiest. During her surveillance, Ashley found out the instructor apparently had another man. I'll attend the yoga class and gather information. Saying that, Ashley started attending the yoga class and got closer to Curtis's mistress, Hilda. It turned out, just as Ashley had guessed, Hilda was engaged and planning to get married in a year. We'll target that time to demand alimony in the divorce trial. Ashley was oddly enthusiastic, but I felt heavy-hearted. I was anxious about whether I could let Curtis be free for so long and act as if everything was normal. Even now, just living in the same house made me feel sick. My anxiety and the stress of living with Curtis culminated in me developing a gastric ulcer. After telling me all that had happened, honestly, I didn't realize you were under so much stress. I'm sorry, Ashley said. When I was taken to the hospital, she discussed with my parents and decided to change the plan to immediate divorce and claim alimony. Hearing Ashley's story, Curtis just hung his head in silence. The 1 year left you heard about was referring to your mistress Hilda's modeling career. Ashley spoke coldly and formally to Curtis. There's no need for such drastic measures, a normal divorce would suffice. Don't destroy someone's happiness like that. Hearing Curtis prioritize Hilda's happiness over our divorce, I felt an anger like never before. Before Ashley could retort, I confronted Curtis. The one who has been destroying my happiness talks now. Curtis looked at me as if bitten by his own dog. After all the exploitation, not caring about my health but worrying about another woman, it's disgusting. I had never known I could despise someone so much. It was the first time I realized that I had such feelings inside me. Disgusting, you say? You don't have the right to talk back to me. My negative emotions were overflowing. Ashley tried to intervene, but she seemed bewildered by my anger. Just as I was about to lash out at Curtis again, Mom intervened softly. "That's enough, Stella." Her voice was gentle and comforting. A voice I'd known since childhood. I snapped back to reality. After a moment of silence, Mom calmly addressed Curtis. "Curtis, I've heard the situation from both Ashley and Stella, but I haven't heard it from you." Curtis looked uncomfortable. "If you have any justification, we're listening." Her voice, different from when she scolded me earlier, now carried a chill. "I don't have any excuses," Curtis stammered. "So, you admit everything is true?" Seemingly accepting his fate, Curtis defiantly admitted.
"Yes. I love Hilda, not Stella. I can't help it. Stella no longer attracts me."
"That's terrible," Ashley muttered.
"Terrible, you say? Which is worse? I thought Hilda and I loved each other. But to think, Hilda had another man."
It seemed Curtis didn't know about Hilda's fiancé. He trembled, fighting back tears. "Do you understand what you're saying?" Mom confronted Curtis. "After making Stella feel the same way, how dare you feel sorry for yourself only?" Curtis looked down, unable to raise his face. Ashley and Mom spoke for me, but I felt nothing for Curtis anymore. I just wanted to be away from him. That was my only wish. "With the divorce, we'll also be claiming alimony from you and Hilda, so please leave for today," I told Curtis formally. He stood up weakly, avoided our gazes, and left the hospital room. I cried over the wasted time I had spent with such a man. After being discharged, Ashley and I went to Hilda's yoga studio. It was under the guise of Ashley canceling her membership, but we intended to tell Hilda everything. However, just as we were about to start, Curtis barged in. As we stood dumbfounded, Curtis snatched Hilda's mobile phone from her resisting hands and called her fiancé. In a fit of desperation, Curtis exposed everything to the fiancé and laughed maniacally. After fiddling with Hilda's phone, he threw it at her and left, making deliberate noise with his steps. As Hilda sat on the floor, I told her, "That was my husband. Why has it come to this?" Hilda looked up at me with surprise, but retorted,
"That man approached me. If you're his wife, you should at least teach your husband some manners."
"I'm getting divorced, and we have all the evidence of the affair," Ashley countered with equal fervor. "Whatever you think, we will be claiming alimony in the divorce trial." Realizing talking here wouldn't make Hilda admit anything, I decided to leave her house with Ashley. Later, Hilda tried to make excuses to her fiancé, but since Curtis had exposed irrefutable photos and messages, her engagement was called off. Furthermore, since Hilda's fiancé was the owner of the entertainment agency she belonged to, she ended up being blacklisted from modeling work. Of course, her yoga studio, financed by her fiancé, was closed down soon after. This story was briefly mentioned in gossip magazines, so whether it was entirely true or not is uncertain. However, a for-lease sign was definitely posted on the yoga studio's house. Faced with undeniable evidence, Curtis and Hilda couldn't resist and had to comply with the compensation claim. After the divorce, I stayed at my parents' house for a while, but moved due to harassment from Curtis and Hilda. Both Curtis and Hilda probably thought they could handle the situation at first, but eventually fell apart. Chased by the alimony payments, Curtis lost his money for gym and beauty treatments, his appearance deteriorated, yet he still made advances on young women at work and ended up being sued. He was fired from his job and even in his new job was relegated to a menial position, spending his days alone organizing documents and supplies. He blamed me for his downfall, claiming it was all because I discovered the affair and filed for divorce. As seen in the tabloids, Hilda, after being abandoned by her fiancé, was sued for the yoga studio's business expenses and chased by debt. She blamed me for her misfortune. My parents quickly sold their house and bought a condominium where the four of us could live together. The condominium has excellent security, so we no longer need to fear harassment from Curtis and Hilda. Feeling it pathetic to rely solely on Ashley's income and my parents' pensions, I learned to use a computer from Ashley and started working from home. I'm surprised to find I had such a talent. Today, I'm writing a column about life's battles. My life might have been an uneventful housewife's, but this divorce saga is sure to attract attention. While adding a bit of color to the story, I type the words. My face is wrapped in a gentle smile.